There's been a lot of talk about health and health practices with COVID-19 going on right now. But I think there's also something that we can learn about safety in the current circumstances. If you have a family, you understand that kids don't just naturally know how to be safe. We have to teach them things like how to wash their hands so they don't get sick, not to touch hot things, not to run out in the street. Safety is something that we don't just understand, we have to be taught it. As some of you may know, I'm doing a health and safety master's program right now. And from the beginning, one of the concepts that emerged as absolutely fundamental to health and safety was the hierarchy of controls. This is something they teach for professionals who are working in the health and safety industry to protect employees. But I think it's something that really applies to our families and to every aspect of our lives. The hierarchy of controls sounds a bit scary or complicated, but it's really neither of those things. It's so simple that I cannot believe that I wasn't taught this in grade school, high school, college, or I never even encountered this in my professional career. I'm shocked at this, that it took me enrolling in a health and safety master's program to encounter this very simple idea. The hierarchy of controls is, simply put, a step-by-step process for making something safer. So here it is. This is the hierarchy of controls. It's 5 steps in an upside-down pyramid that tell us how to make something safer. It's not complicated. So let's look at it in the context of COVID-19. First, we have elimination. And I think a perfect example of eliminating a hazard or a risk to someone is a vaccine. If we can get rid of a virus or any kind of disease completely, then it's no longer a risk to us anymore. Now let's consider the case where someone comes up with a vaccine, but perhaps it makes us sick for a day or two, and perhaps it's a lot less sick than we would have been if we actually got COVID-19. That's a good example of substitution. We have something that's high risk, COVID-19, but we can swap it out for something that's less risky, like getting sick from the vaccine. So that's an example of substitution. Okay, now let's look at engineering controls. I think we've actually seen a lot of these lately with COVID-19. The best example that I can think of is the plexiglass or clear plastic that we've seen supermarkets put up between the cashier and the general public, with the intent to protect them without anyone having to wear anything or do anything or stay a certain distance away. This is something that's built into place and requires no action on anybody's part to protect them. Now, we've also seen a lot of administrative controls be put into place. Another supermarket example is controlling the flow in and out of a supermarket and limiting the number of people that are in there, asking people to stay 6 feet or 2 meters apart from each other at all times. It's something that is a policy that we've put into place that requires people to abide by that policy for them to be protected. Finally, at the bottom of our pyramid, we have PPE, personal protective equipment. Now, I think a lot of us have encountered PPE like hard hats or gloves, or maybe wear a dust mask for sanding, that sort of thing. But really, these should be used as a last resort. However, we've still seen this with COVID-19. We've seen people wearing the respirators and face coverings, face masks. We've seen medical personnel wearing their garb and their gear and all of this that's meant to protect them. We've seen people wearing gloves. All of that protects people, but it's really the last and final barrier between them and COVID-19. Okay, so let's circle back to how we can protect our families with this really simple concept of the hierarchy of controls. There have been a number of cases where children or toddlers have been crushed by a piece of furniture that tips over on them. I'm sure you've heard about this. It's not something that's new, but it is something that I think we can think about using this hierarchy of controls to help us. So let's talk about elimination. Say you have a dresser. Do you really actually need that dresser in your room or in the room where the toddler is? Can you eliminate that dresser so that it doesn't pose any risk to them? That's our first step. Probably not. Most people need a dresser in their bedroom. You probably put it in there for a reason, and the reason is that you need some space for clothes and that sort of thing. However, you could substitute that piece of furniture. You could swap it out for one that has perhaps a lower center of gravity and is less likely to tip over. You could swap it out for some built-in shelves instead. That brings us to our next thing, which is engineering controls. Now, I'm sure if any of you have ever bought IKEA furniture, you know that it comes with a little strap that you screw one part of it onto the furniture and the other part onto the wall, with the intent that if it starts to tip over, that will hit that strap and you'll be preventing the furniture from tipping over. That's an engineering control. Next, administrative controls. So this would be something like telling your toddler, no, don't climb on the furniture, it'll tip over. That's a pretty weak control, isn't it? Another example might be to always have someone in the room where there's a child and a piece of furniture that could tip over. That's pretty weak as well. And then finally, let's think about PPE. It's pretty unlikely that there's PPE that's sufficient to protect a toddler from something tipping over on them. And even if that was the case, would you really want that? Is it really going to protect your kid that well? So I don't think they make baby hard hats. I don't think there's any kind of clothing that would protect a kid from such a thing that they could wear constantly. It really highlights how ineffective PPE can be at controlling a hazard and how important it is to use these other steps first. I hope this has been helpful. I hope it hasn't been too preachy. My intent with this is really not that you try to use this information to protect your families from COVID-19. I think that information is already out there and available. Instead, I hope you are able to see this hierarchy of controls that's being used to protect people from coronavirus, and instead take that and apply those same principles to protecting yourself and your family from other things. I really care about safety and safety for families. As a parent, you hear about tragedies out there, and it's really just unthinkable to empathize with the loss that some people have experienced. And it's even more unthinkable to know that maybe we could have done something to stop that.